Welcome to Biota.org Interviews. I'm Tom Barbalet, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Jonathan Klein, the creator of the Breve development. Jonathan, for people not familiar with your background, can you please give some introduction and how you got interested in artificial life?
Well, I've been working with artificial life in some form and artificial intelligence in some form for a number of years, starting with my undergraduate work at Hampshire College. I continued afterwards doing some work with biology and started to get thinking on sort of general environments for simulating artificial life, and then went back to school for a master's degree at Chalmers University, where I developed this project, the Breve simulation environment.
For people not familiar with Breve, I know it's relatively complicated for a new user, but if you could give some discussion to what it is and how it's developed.
The goal behind Breve was to allow people maybe not intimately familiar with programming to develop sort of advanced artificial life simulations. There have been a lot of great and interesting artificial life simulations out there over the years that have been sort of difficult to get into and to work on because they require a lot of a large foundation of programming or a lot of tools. So the goal behind Breve was to sort of collect a bunch of features together in one place that people could use to very quickly develop advanced artificial life simulations. So some of the features that it includes, for example, are integrated physical simulation and 3D worlds. It includes support for things like collision detection and all sorts of sensors and interactions between agents. So the idea was to build all of this stuff into one place so that people wouldn't have to redevelop all this entire foundation to develop an artificial life simulation.
When you came to initially developing Breve, how did you lay it out? What was your thinking in terms of putting the various components together? And did you start with a kind of rich structural overview, or did it kind of evolve over time?
It kind of evolved over time based on, if I go way back, it was sort of based on projects like, in fact, Logo and Star Logo, which was around at the time. Star Logo in particular is a similar environment sort of in spirit, but it's kind of a different implementation. Star Logo is meant, obviously, for development of multi-agent systems, but it doesn't have things like support for 3D worlds and sort of continuous behaviors in space. So when it came to developing Breve, I mimicked a number of ideas from that environment, but wanted to add in a lot of features for more advanced simulation. So one of the features which I really liked about Star Logo and tried to work into Breve was the fact that it's an entirely integrated environment. The fact that the language that you write simulations in is built into the software, which means that when you make changes to the program, you see them right away, as opposed to an environment which requires you to recompile a program and then launch it separately.
In terms of the diversity of Breve users, I know you got a DARPA grant with the military, and a wide variety of A-Life projects seem to either be represented in the source code or could easily be ported to Breve. Can you talk about the diversity of users that Breve has?
When I first developed Breve, I had a couple of very specific artificial life projects in mind, the types of things that I wanted to develop with Breve. And that includes Carl Sims's Creatures, most directly, also Larry Yeager's Polyworld. I really wanted an environment that would let people compose these sorts of artificial life simulations. Somewhat to my surprise, of course, when people picked up the software, these weren't always the types of projects that people came up with. So over the years, it's been used for a number of things, for art projects and sort of installation art pieces. It's been used for military types of simulations. We've done some projects with that military grant on evolving behaviors for unmanned aerial vehicles. People have used it for biological simulations. People have used it for development of music composition environments. And most recently, over the past couple of years, through my sort of continued work with Hampshire College, it's been used in an educational setting more often.
In terms of the transition of Brevet from an academic project to a hobby, back to an academic project, back to a hobby, can you give some discussion of these various transitions and how the project has evolved through them?
As I said, it started off as the seeds of the project came from my undergraduate work at Hampshire College, where I was working with artificial intelligence, and that's where the idea for it came. But it wasn't until I was actually out of school there that I began to do the actual work on it and develop it into, an actual environment. So over the years, it's sort of gone into academia and out of academia a couple of times, and each time it's sort of changed a little bit. And most recently, now that it's sort of come back out of academia again, I'm finding that I'm interested in other types of applications. I'm really interested in the artistic and the educational applications of it now, more than just the sort of simulation of artificial life aspects.
Now, Brevet is made of a number of components, and certainly there may be potential for users, expert users, to want to use particular components, Steve, for example, or perhaps the physics rendering, or things of this nature. What capabilities are available for people to take components of Brevet for their own development?
Well, for starters, it's entirely open source, so people are welcome to sort of take apart any pieces that they're interested in. Although that's, even with open source projects, that's not always trivial. So the source code right now is divided up into these sort of various areas that people can adopt for themselves. But it's actually an important goal for me to develop that further and make these parts more modular. In particular, the Steve language, which for people who don't know, it's the language in which Brevet simulations are written, and it's a language that I wrote specifically for Brevet. That language I developed to be something to be easy to write artificial life simulations in. But over the years, what I've learned is that even if I think it's a great language for writing artificial life simulations in, it's not necessarily the type of language that people are used to or have any experience with, because it's unique to this project. So what I've come to realize is that it would be very useful for people to be able to write simulations in other languages that they're more familiar with, even if those languages aren't developed specifically for artificial life. So that's something I'm actively working on.
In terms of additional features, looking at it, there are things like more complex landscapes, perhaps different physics, lunar landscapes, things of this nature. Are these features that you're thinking of adding in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I've said before, another part of the goal is to make everything more modular so that these things can be integrated more easily. Again, the biggest feature that I'm looking at is expanding the ways that people will be able to interact with the simulations. So that means new languages such as Python or Java front ends, or new ways to sort of package up the simulations and let other people run them.
I noticed the most recent release of Brevet made reference to logo in terms of the new graphics that you're adding, the turtle graphics. Can you give some discussion to your background interest in logo and how important it has been in developing Brevet?
Sure. As I mentioned before, the project, the first seeds of the project really came out of from the Star Logo project and from reading I think Mitchell Resnick's book on Star Logo and on multi-agent systems. And so over the years, it's developed in sort of a different direction. But what I find recently over the past couple of years is with the interest in education and with the interest in using Brevet for art, for artistic applications, I'm really interested in bringing back in some of the features of Logo, namely the extreme ease with which people, non-experienced programmers can write simulations or, create images, and again, the sort of integrated nature of the environment that people can just sort of pick it up right away.
You're a member of Grey Thumb. For people not familiar with Grey Thumb, can you please give some background to it?
Grey Thumb is a group in Boston of artificial life enthusiasts, and we've been, me meeting a couple of times every month just for general artificial life discussions. We're in the process right now of trying to expand the group even further. We feel like there are a lot of people in the Boston area who would be really interested in artificial life and its applications with so much biology industry here, biotechnology, and so many academic institutions. So people who are interested in learning more about the organization can look at greythumb.org.
In terms of having a physical group that gets together and meets, I know you've worked in collaborations, you've worked over the internet, but what benefits do you get in actually having a regular physical meeting with people?
What we're trying to do with our meetings, or one of the things we're trying to do, is really get people involved in each other's projects, and get involved in collaboration. And the difference between doing that in person versus over the net is that there are a lot of great projects out there, but some of them can be sort of unapproachable because they require intimate knowledge with certain kinds of systems. So I'm finding that the face-to-face approach really allows somebody to introduce their project to other people in a much more approachable way than just browsing at a website. And that's actually feedback that I've gotten about Breve, is that sometimes people just looking at the website maybe have trouble understanding what it is or how they could use it, but when you actually get to sit down with somebody and show them and answer their questions directly, people are a lot more interested in getting involved in other people's projects.
An interesting aspect of Brevo that we haven't yet touched on is the screensaver that you have for the Macintosh.
Mm-hmm.
Can you discuss how that has encouraged new interest in A-Life and the feedback that you've received from having a screensaver?
The screensaver was sort of unexpectedly, I guess, the sort of the biggest success of the project. Especially a couple of years ago when it first came out, it seemed to get a lot of attention. The type of attention that the artificial life project, that the simulation environment project itself didn't get. The screensavers that I put out, there was one based on a group of swarming agents, and there was another one which was based loosely on Carl Sims's creatures. One was called Breve Walker, which featured a small physically simulated creature learning how to walk. By far, I got far more downloads of the screensaver version than of the software itself, and people who didn't know what artificial life was or have any interest in pursuing it really took to the screensaver, because everybody can understand the plight of this poor little creature trying to make its way across the screen. So, I would say that artificial life, a lot of projects have these great sort of semi-entertainment or artistic applications, and I feel like that's a really great way for people to get others involved in artificial life projects.
Some personal feedback. That screensaver actually got more people back to Noble Ape, and I think it had a cumulative effect on the artificial life community. So, as an aside, I'd like to thank you for the screensaver.
Okay.
And I think it's a powerful way, actually, to get artificial life projects out to a very passive audience.
And as I mentioned before, I'm more and more interested in the artistic applications of artificial life these days, so I'm looking forward to seeing other projects of the same kind.
What more would you like to see with the broader A-Life community?
I would like to really see A-Life as a field sort of be taken as seriously as things like biology and the other fields that sort of surround artificial life. I feel like artificial life has a tremendous amount to offer to computer scientists, to biologists, to people studying social interactions. There are all sorts of areas that artificial life touches on, but people who aren't familiar with it don't necessarily always get it, and it seems like something that's really fringy to a lot of people, but I think there's a lot of work in artificial life that isn't fringy at all. It's downright practical. So I would like to see a wider acceptance of the artificial life community, or the field of artificial life.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to interview you. That concludes our Biota.org interview with Jonathan Klein. You can find Jonathan's project, Breve, at spiderland.org/breve. That's spiderland.org/BREVE. If you're interested in being interviewed for these podcasts, please get in contact with me, tom@nobleape.com. That's tom@nobleape.com. I'd also like to recommend that if you're not a member of the Biota.org mailing list, it is a useful source of getting information aside from these podcasts. If you're interested in a little more on me and why I'm doing these podcasts, my own project, Noble Ape, has a podcast, Ape Reality, which gives some intimate insight in the kind of developments and day-to-day musings of an A-Life developer. You can get to that podcast through the Biota.org pages. At the very bottom, you'll see a link to my Noble Ape simulation, and below that, you'll see the link to the Ape Reality page, which will get you more information on receiving the podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in to Biota.org interviews. Look forward to you tuning into the next podcast.